Let's have a chat, shall we? In today's world where even the subject of mathematics is accused of being racist, 2 plus 2 equals what?
Gotcha.
It's not much of a stretch to accuse the practice of appraisals as being racist too. But there's a massive difference between one racist appraiser and a systemic system of racism designed to disenfranchise an entire population. You'll never eradicate the concept of racism. There's always going to be someone with boneheaded, misguided beliefs and outdated thinking, whether it's law enforcement or appraisers or any person in any profession. But this is different. So a couple weeks ago, our vice president declared that their administration is developing a rule to tackle racial bias in home valuations. Now, this isn't a political channel, but when politics intervene with real estate, that's where I jump in. For the past few years, I've been meaning to do a dedicated video on why appraisals are bullshit. After 20 years in real estate, I've seen both extremes and everything in between. So today I'm going to break this topic up into 2 videos. In part 1 here, I'm going to quickly discuss what the Biden administration is attempting to do, while part 2 is going to explain the many flaws in the appraisal process. Now, as you'll discover later in part 2, the appraisal industry has a long history of being the scapegoat for complicated matters involving real estate. Now, during the Great Recession, the appraisal industry was essentially blamed for the housing crash. Now, while there was culpability there, greedy banks and lack of personal responsibility were largely ignored. Now, in this incarnation, there's a few moving parts and 2 completely different issues that haven't truly been addressed. Now, this past year, there was a trending story about a black family outside of San Francisco in Marin County. They remodeled their home and applied to refinance. Now, the appraisal came in at just under $1.5 million. Less than a year later, they decided to revisit refinancing, but this time the appraisal came in at just under $1 million, basically 33% less than they had just received only a few months prior. When they disputed the appraisal with their lender, the lender agreed to send out a second appraiser. Now, this time, the family removed all family photos and anything that may suggest ethnicity in the home. They had a white friend hang out at the house during the appraisal to look like it was basically a white household. That second appraisal by the lender wound up $32,500 higher than the original appraisal they had received earlier in the year. By whitewashing their home, they managed to raise the appraisal back up to almost $1.5 million again. Now, you can guess the rest. They sued the appraiser, her company, and the appraisal management company that hired her.
What did you think would happen?
Now, clearly this is an extreme example of either blatant racism or just careless appraising. Now, as you dig more into the details of the case instead of just emotional outrage, it all boiled down to the comparables that the appraiser used to dictate the subject property's value. Now look, we can all agree that a racist appraiser who deliberately devalues a family's home solely on the basis of race is disgusting and has no place in business or society. However, what the Biden administration is attempting to do is much farther reaching than simply attempting to eradicate racist appraisers. They want to overhaul the entire industry and how entire communities are evaluated. Back in June of 2021, Biden created the Interagency Task Force on Property Appraisal and Valuation Equity, otherwise known as PAVE. Thank God. The purpose was to end bias in home valuations. That same year, Freddie Mac found that Black and Latino homeowners are about twice as likely as whites to get low appraisals. Now, in that report, it stated that over 12% of properties in Black neighborhoods receive appraisals lower than the contract price. Even worse, Latino neighborhoods came in at over 15%. And while 24% of our entire country are minorities, only 15% of appraisers are minorities. Now that's according to the Appraisal Institute. Meanwhile, Kamala Harris claimed only 5% of appraisers are minorities just a couple weeks ago. So I'll let you decide who to believe on that one. Now, in addition to encouraging the appraisal industry to reevaluate minority neighborhoods, the administration wants to make home valuation data for more than 600,000 properties public information. They want to boost diversity among appraisers and institute new tools for consumers to challenge appraisals. All right, so let's try and unpack all this. First the issues, then the big picture. Appraisals are private information. If you want a general idea of value, there's hundreds of sites, including Zillow, that can provide you with that. But would you want your appraisal public information? Now, I don't want photos of my interior displayed for public consumption. I don't want people knowing what improvements I've done to my home and how much those improvements are allegedly valued at.
They steal your private information so that big business can spy on you and crush your soul.
Really?
Now, what good does making that information public actually do? Then, of course, how do you recruit more minorities? Are those minorities expected to boost appraisals in minority-occupied neighborhoods then? Now, according to Statista, the largest US banks now have 43% minority employment. Well, that's 18% more than the US population has. So does the banking industry need to become more white to better reflect the overall population? I'm just saying, to me, the problem has more to do with appraisal guidelines or lack thereof, much more than trying to hire more minorities to follow the same crappy rules that currently exist today. Now let's look at the big picture. When you talk about predominantly Black or Latino neighborhoods, rarely, if ever, are we talking about an affluent neighborhood. In just about every major city I know of in America, the affluent neighborhoods tend to be predominantly white and or Jewish, Asian, or Middle Eastern. The neighborhoods with the most crime and lowest education levels tend to be Black and Hispanic. Look, I'm a minority myself, and I don't think that's an opinion, but rather statistically accurate. Let's also be honest, the best realtors, lenders, appraisers, contractors, whatever, they tend to focus on the more affluent areas. As a result, these neighborhoods are serviced by less educated and less professional representatives. Additionally, lower-end homes tend to have more offers since there's more competition for affordable housing, and every investor can afford to own one. So when demand is high and supply is low, prices tend to be pushed to and above the brink. Over the years, I've sold countless homes in white neighborhoods that didn't appraise, because the market was outpacing the appraisal process. But those buyers still paid over appraisal because that's simply what it took to secure the property. Appraisers can only use comparable sales that have closed. That always puts them living in the past as opposed to the present. Now, the question for me is this: did those Black and Hispanic buyers still pay the contract price like their white counterparts did? Or did these lower appraisals result in lower sales prices as well? Ultimately, I don't see how you can artificially inflate appraisals in Black and Hispanic neighborhoods simply due to ethnicity. The goal is simply to create fair appraisals, but some issues are simply systemic. Let's be honest, Black and Latino neighborhoods tend to be poor. Unfortunately, poor people and poor neighborhoods tend to receive worse service and lower quality products like produce and food options. Solving poverty is a completely different topic, but as you'll see in part 2, the entire system of appraisals is quite flawed. While racism exists in all aspects of life worldwide, the common goal is to simply create fairness. The appraisal industry is very flawed for multiple factors, but making appraisals public and artificially boosting values isn't going to solve the systemic problems within the industry. That's simply creating more problems with deeper implications. Well, that's it for part 1. Stay tuned for part 2, where I explain some of these systemic issues that I've alluded to in this video. As always, please like this video, click to subscribe, and share this with your friends and family. See you in part 2. Deuces.